Hello. Hi, everyone. I am Jenny Holm, and
I'm Matt. I'm the which one am I? Can you remember the order?
I feel like you are the Babby brother. You are
The Babby, the wee Babby brother.
you're the Babby, Matt. We are two of five children. I am the middle child, and Matt is the youngest brother, and I'm the only girl. So I'm sure other girls out there are feeling very sorry for me. Um, we We are so excited. We are the creators of the Sunny series. So you might know Sunny Side Up, Swing It Sunny, Sunny Rolls the Dice, and now, dun dun dun, Sunny Makes a Splash. It just came out about 2 weeks ago. And so we are so thrilled to be doing this event for teachers and students as part of Barnes & Noble's Fall Educator Appreciation Week. And we're super excited to hear from all of you who are watching us, maybe from your classrooms or at home. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and we're going to get to them later in the show. All right, so let's get this book party started. Matt, where are you zooming in from?
So I am in the Hudson Valley in New York State, about an hour and a bit north of the city, out in the woods. Our house is being completely redone on the outside right now, but luckily no one's here right now. There's no no hammering or drilling or anything happening right now.
Any animals roaming around?
Yes, we have many animals up here. We have wild animals, of course. We have, we haven't seen a bear yet, though they have been in the neighborhood. We get deer, we get squirrels, rabbits, skunks. We have chickens, which
How many chickens do you have?
we're up to 7 now. we have 6 hens and 1 rooster, who was a surprise. They were supposed to send us 3 hens, and they sent us 3 hens and an extra chicken who turned out to be a rooster. So that's our rooster Eloise, because Eloise was supposed to be another hen, but Eloise doesn't care. So
there's a picture book in there somewhere.
And we also have, hang on, let me grab the other wild animal here.
This is the best, friends. This is what I was trying to get him to.
Oh, tiny sleepy puppy.
Puppy! Oh, the best doggo ever. Hi, puppy. Hi, it's your aunt.
This is El Morenin, who is very small, though full grown. She can expand to great lengths.
She's like a little wiener dog, like a Doxy, right?
Yeah, she's like a Dachshund Chihuahua and some other stuff mix. We don't know. We got her from a pound from a shelter. She was just being born shortly before the pandemic, and so we picked her up right as we were getting ready to lock down with her here for months on end. So.
Oh my goodness, she's 100% super adorable.
Well, so I will let her go back to sleeping now.
No. We can just watch puppy. I have no cute animals with me. I'm actually zooming in from Temecula, California, which is
exotic.
Yeah, it's a bit of a farm country. So there's a lot of horses and vineyards, and I'm actually going to an alpaca farm later this afternoon to pet some alpacas.
Alpacas are cool.
I know, I've never seen one in real life, so I'm very excited. So woohoo!
Woo!
All right, so I guess we have to move on from the cute world of animals. So, although I could talk about animals forever. So let's talk about the original inspiration for Sunny Makes a Splash. And I think in order to do that, we kind of have to talk about diving boards. Now, Matt, have you ever done a dive off of like a high diving board?
So when we were kids, diving boards were different than what they kind of allow in home and in public pools today. So I remember our neighbors, the Maypoles, didn't they have like a pool with like a 10-foot diving board or something, which would be totally illegal today? And
in their backyard.
In their backyard, backyard pool. And then at the General Washington pool, which was the inspiration for the General Lafayette pool in this book, we had 3 diving boards there. There was the low diving board, which was, you know, just raised off the concrete, and I dove off of that a whole bunch, and same
Yep.
in my high school and everything. Then there was the medium diving board that was about 8 to 10 feet, somewhere in that zone, maybe, I want to say. And I think I jumped off of that, not dove head first.
That's a bit
And
scary. Yeah.
that's scary. And then the high dive, which would be completely illegal today. I don't even, that had to be 16 feet or 20 feet or something.
Yep.
It's like, again, this is like we're training for the Olympics or something at your your local fun public pool. But yeah, I never went off that. And I remember there's actually like a water park near our house that I went to once, and they had like just like a platform that you just like leaped off of into the water that had to be almost 4 stories in the air. And I remember distinctly going up to the edge, just like Sunny in the book, looking over the edge and saying, nope, and then turning around and going back down, walking my way down.
Which was probably a good idea.
Yeah, I'm still here today. So,
I mean, I had a totally similar experience. I did go off the high dive, but not too many times. Always jumped, never dove. I couldn't imagine going feet first. And many times I went all the way up to the top, looked, and went back down. And the amount of fury when you're going down, because it's not just you going up the ladder. It's like every single kid is like a monkey waiting for their turn in line.
Nobody stays at the bottom and then waits for you to dive. And then, no, they're all waiting in traffic on the ladder.
Yeah, it was kind of it was freestyle diving, crazy.
Yeah.
Well, so Sunny Makes a Splash is really about Sunny it's about her summer. So it starts right after Sunny rolls the dice. So it's right after that school year, and it's summertime, and it turns out that most of her buddies, all her friends they're all kind of like traveling for the summer or visiting grandparents, and she's kind of stuck and bored, and she ends up kind of accidentally getting a job at the local swim club. And she gets a job because she has a friend from school named Tony who works at the snack bar there. His dad is actually the manager for the pool. And so the actual inspiration for that was my first real job. I mean, my first job was being a babysitter because I had 2 younger brothers. I wasn't exactly paid for that. I was eventually paid for babysitting. I babysat a lot of other kids in the neighborhood. But my first job that didn't involve watching kids in their houses was at the snack bar, and I loved it. We didn't serve a lot of food. We pretty much had hot dogs, ice cream, soda, and fries. So we had like a deep fryer. So, and ice cream in the 70s.
People don't understand today what ice cream was. Like ice cream in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of fresh ice cream available to kids, but there was a lot of weird prepackaged ice cream readily available to kids. You know, there were actual ice cream trucks that would go around the neighborhood, and unlike like in New York City when we lived there, you'd have the Mr. Softy truck that was like soft serve cone. This was all hard frozen prepackaged wrapped things, but you'd hear that little bell, or when you went to the pool, they would all be there. And they were awesome and weird and crazy, all of the ice creams that they had.
What was your favorite ice cream?
So I always liked the Cannonball one, where it's some sort of sherbet type thing. I don't know. But then there's a gumball at the bottom. Yep. So it was like a free prize, and then it was like another entire snack, item after you were done.
Yeah. It was kind of like a blow pop. There was like a gum on the
inside. Right, exactly.
I loved snow cones. I still love snow cones because they were the most refreshing on a hot day.
So they were like the worst replica of an actual fresh snow cone. Yes. They were hard as a rock. Yeah, you could hammer nails with them. Like at halftime, all the juice. Yeah, like the juice would like fall out. The top would be like clear ice or something.
Yeah, because it would be like all rainbow perfect. By the time you got to the bottom, it would all kind of turn to brown or
yes, all these lovely.
All the
colors.
dye would be horrible. So I thought, why don't we dive into, how do we make our graphic novels? Because we don't live near each other. We've really, since we started working together, we haven't lived near each other. So Matt, why don't you take us through a little tour about how we collaborate.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a few years ago talking about this seemed so exotic and strange, but now everyone is so used to doing some sort of remote collaboration, whether it's talking with your class or talking with authors or working from home, et cetera, et cetera. But we've been doing it so long, it just seems like second nature now. And we don't actually generally work at the same time. That's one of the things that's a little different than some other people who are doing their jobs or class, Q&A and things like that together. Is we'll do part of our job and then we'll send that work off to the other person, and then they'll do their work on it and then send it back. So everything starts with the story. So let me share some stuff with everybody. So Jenny takes the first crack at writing the story, and she doesn't use a traditional manuscript, where you type it out with sentences and paragraphs, like you would see in a chapter book, because this is a graphic novel. So it can't quite look the same, because we have to think about how we're approaching it differently. How do we show what's happening in the action? Because there are all these visuals to think about, that sort of thing. So Jenny uses a storyboard, which ends up looking like this, just page after page of these grids. And the way it works is, you see we have 3 rows going across, and each row is a different thing that's going to be happening at a moment in the story. And each column is a different beat, a different scene, a different part of a scene from the story, one moment after the other. So in the top, Jenny writes in any of the narration that goes in the story. So like when the narrator says, "It was the next day at school," or here, we have the narrator says, "a little later." So we know that some time has passed, it's later in the day. Then in the second row, Jenny writes in a description of the action, whatever the characters are doing, where they are, what the scene looks like, so that I know what I should be drawing. So we see things like Mom to Sonny. So mom is talking to Sonny. Mom is frowning. And then we see cut to, as if it's a movie and we're cutting to a new scene. Sonny and Brian swimming at the pool. And then in the bottom row here, we see the dialogue. And now, of course, in chapter books, dialogue would be broken out by those little curly quotes, and it would have, like he said or she said or Sonny said this. In here, because we're making a graphic novel, we use speech bubbles to put the dialogue in. So the speech bubbles are going to contain the text that's here. And so we'll have, like, for instance, Mom says, "Sonny, you need to ask permission to go somewhere. You can't just say yes." Sonny's saying, "I'm going to the pool." And her mom's scolding her a little bit. And Sonny says, "Sorry." And so any dialogue or any big sound effects that have to go in, like pow or splat or boom, Jenny puts in this bottom row. And then I know to write those on the page. So she writes the entire story this way. And it's a lot of pages. I mean, here I'm scrolling through for this book. Oh my goodness. 174 pages of storyboard, which is a lot. That's a very big book. It's always exhausting for us to look back at all the work we had to do.
Oh my goodness.
So we start with that. Jenny sends it to me, and I'll go through and I'll edit and I'll revise and I'll make changes, suggestions where things could be clearer, things could be funnier. Then we send it to our editors, and our editor, he goes through and makes changes and suggestions, and we'll take another crack at revising it. And then after it's been through a bunch of rounds of revision, I can finally start drawing. And when I draw, I don't go straight into drawing the pages like you see in the comics with all the little squares on them and everything. Instead, I do a bunch of what are called thumbnail sketches. And so these will be sort of disconnected, rough sketches of all the action that Jenny's described. And so I try to think of different ways to show everything that's happening, every moment of the story that we're going to be telling. So in this sequence where, this is one of the scans of my sketchbook. And so we see, I just scribble in chapter 5, snack bar. So we see a fryer going with fries in it. We see Sonny eating breakfast. Mom is there. She says, "Do you want to have a birthday party this year?" And so we go through, and then Sonny winds up at the pool. she's with her friend Brian, and then she sees Tony's at the snack bar, and it's Adult Swim, which of course means that all the kids have to get out of the pool so the adults can swim and not be disturbed. And then every kid whoosh rushes towards the snack bar because that's the when everybody has free time and is ready for a snack. So I give Jenny suggestions sometimes, like, here I have this as one big scene, or it could also be cut into separate frames. You can see I've just quickly scribbled over the text, me first, here, no, two. And then I might have things like, when I draw Sunny here, she's got a determined face. I'll make little notes like that to remind us. And so then she climbs in and helps Tony serve up the dish, serve up the lunch rush there. And sometimes when we're doing this, because graphic novels, we figure them out to a specific length. They can't be too long, they can't be too short. It's sort of like an episode of a TV show that has to be exactly half an hour or something. We realize that the story's getting too long. And so, like, here, for example, was a bunch of sketches I did for a scene that we actually ended up cutting down a lot. So we see Sunny and her family. They're in the backyard. Dad's grilling up some burgers. Mom's bringing some buns along. And they're arguing about whether Sunny should be able to go work at the pool. And then we get into her dad. And he says, I think it's a good idea if she takes the job. And he said, when I was Sunny's age, I was milking cows twice a day at the family farm. I had to wash out the milk containers. That was the worst. If we didn't pick them up right away, they get all curdled and smell like rotten cheese. And so we have some flashback shots of young Sunny's dad cleaning up the gross milk cans. And then at the end, of course, the little zinger is Dad asked, cheese on your burger, Sunny? And she thinks about the stinky cheese smell and she says, no, thanks. So that was a fun little bit and a fun gag, but we couldn't fit that in. So a lot of the gross dairy stuff got cut out.
I don't know. Maybe I might keep that gag for the next book, so don't throw it out.
Yeah, shh. Everyone forget about that. You might see it in an upcoming book. So after I scan these, or draw these, I scan them all in and I'll send them to Jenny. And when she gets my scans, she'll print them out and then she'll cut out each little chunk of the scene and paste them down onto sheets of paper. So we can see, all those disconnected sketches I did now wind up as actual panels. And she'll quickly roughly draw in where the panel borders should be and things like that. And then I'll go from here on out and actually draw the final art. And all of my final art is done inside the computer. I use a big drawing tablet screen that I can draw right onto. And I'll start with this initial sketch layout that Jenny made for me. I will make it so that I can see over it. So I turn it like a lighter color, like a green or a blue or something, so that I can see when I draw on top of it. And then I'll start inking over it. So you can see I've got the cartoon panels. I've got all these black inks in here. I've got them down here. And as I'm working, it can get kind of confusing trying to figure out what's going on because, sometimes I might have all these things stacked up on top of each other. You can see all these layers I have over here for like the actual ink, and then for the background as a separate layer. I try to keep everything separated so that I can move things around if I need to, or reuse backdrops, sort of like how they used to make drawn animation. They would just have like one background and they just use it over and over again.
Yep.
And so then when I'm done with all of these inks, I will send them on to my to our colorist, Lark. And so Lark, she takes all of my drawings and then she goes through and whoop, this is what the final product finally looks like. Colors everything in, and then we drop in all of those speech bubbles with all the text that Jenny worked out ahead of time right onto the page.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. There are actually, when you think about like making a book, a lot of people think that it's just you as the writer and illustrator. It's just the two of you. And the case for really making all books, graphic novels and prose books, is there you kind of have a whole team. So there's the writer and the illustrator. We have Lark Pian, who's our colorist. We have somebody who puts all the text in. We have our MacGyver in New York City at Scholastic Graphics, Phil Falco. He's the one that, since everything is online, people are emailing him art, and he
My gosh.
smashes it all together like a big Subway sandwich.
And then ships it off to printing presses and finds printing presses and
Yeah, I mean, it's really literally like a worldwide production. I mean, in the early, I think it was for the first Sunny book, Matt
Yeah.
Matt was living in China, and so he was sending in art from China. Our publisher Scholastic was in New York. I was in California. Lark was in Oregon. It was crazy. We were in like
Yeah.
4 different time zones, but it all worked. It all worked out.
Yeah.
So how long does it usually take us, Matt, to this whole process from, just coming up with the idea till the book is actually on the shelf at Barnes and Noble at the end?
So it's generally, and you can tell by the publication dates on our books, they come out about 2 years apart, and
Yep.
it's because it takes us roughly 2 years to kind of work through everything. You'll be writing for several months, has to go to our editor. Our editor, he's working on our book and other books, so he'll work through that as he can, gets it back to us. We have to revise. That takes time. And then my sketches alone take 3 months or so, usually, just the thumbnails, and then the inking can easily take 4 to 6 months to do.
Wow.
And then usually Lark, our colorist, is working kind of concurrently with me, so I'll start feeding her batches of like 20 or 30 pages at a time, and so she's usually maybe like a quarter of the book behind me as I'm working, and then after I'm done, she still has a few more weeks of coloring to do to wrap everything up.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the things that makes this book a little bit more challenging, more time consuming, is that it's not just a regular fiction story, it's historical fiction.
Yeah.
And, it takes place in the 70s, and, the 70s, woo, I know
We're
we're so old.
awesome.
We're awesome, but it's also like, it's so old, it's historical fiction, but we can't just like zip off like, I don't know, it's a car, whatever, and it can't be it has to sort of look realistic to what it was. And actually, as we're going through and each year of Sunny, I'm trying to make sure that I have cars that would be from the model year that was there or earlier if they're older cars. We're trying to match the fashion. So actually, a lot of what I do is photo research. So let me run through some of the things I've got. So this is what I have. This folder is called the morgue. And that term I picked up when I was a kid. I was my senior year in high school. I had a mentor-menteeship with Tony Auth, who was the political cartoonist at the Philadelphia Inquirer. And, he had to keep photo reference of all of these politicians and famous people. And whenever he needed a new picture, he would go to this big file drawer that they had called the morgue, which they colloquially called it, because it was a big drawer full of, people, sometimes that was usually saved for like their obituaries and things like that. So it was kind of like a grim joke that it's this place, this drawer is full of photos of people. So in my morgue, I have all these photos, usually of like products and things. So I've got like a laundry basket that we would have had in the 70s that mom's carrying, or beach chairs.
Oh, I love the beach chairs. I want those chairs back.
I know, aren't they great? Oh, barking puppies. Hang on, I might have to release the hound. Hold up.
It's okay. So while he's on puppy duty, we are going to go to some questions from our audience. I'm so psyched to see questions in the chat. All right, I'm going to start with Tate. Tate wants to know, how many Sunny books are there going to be?
Ooh.
We don't know, but I can tell you I am currently writing the next Sunny book. Mm-hmm. I've outlined it, and I'm 50% through doing the storyboard. So that's pretty fun. And I can give you a little hint. It's going to be a little bit about Sunny learning how to debate. Mm. All right, so let's keep going. Some questions. Tabby wants to know, what is the toughest part of writing and illustrating together?
Hmm. I mean, I don't know. It's actually, I think people think that collaborating with someone is going to make it harder,
Yep.
but it actually makes everything a lot easier because it's not all on your shoulders. You know, as you were saying earlier, there's this idea that when you're writing a book, you're doing it all by yourself. But there's always a whole team at the publishing house that's helping you. And we, you know, since we're collaborating together, it makes everything easier because you always have a person who has a second opinion on things. If you're not sure, you always, you know, even though it wouldn't necessarily be your part of the job, like if you are just an illustrator and you don't do any of the writing, it's kind of nice to know that someone else is doing work on your project for you. You know, it'd be like if you had homework at school and someone suddenly came in after you were working on it for half an hour and said, okay, my turn. And then they started working on your homework for you.
Yeah, I mean, I love collaborating. So I also I do prose books by myself. So the newest book is Lion of Mars, which is available at your local Barnes and Noble. Go check it out. But those books take me so long. I mean, I think Lion of Mars took me 3 years at least, maybe 4. I stopped counting because it's really just, it's mostly me in my head. I have an amazing editor I work with, but I find it frustrating not to have a buddy to work with. All right, now the questions are coming fast and furious. Have you? Nancy wants to know: Have you two ever disagreed on a scene, and how do you reach a solution? That's a good question. We get that a lot too, I would say.
Yeah. Um, I mean, there's a couple things. One is the way we kind of work is that I always say it's kind of like a video editing model, you know. So imagine Jenny's writing the script for a movie, and then I kind of go out and I'm like the person shooting all the raw footage. You know, I'm doing all these different camera angles, all these different shots. And so I'm intentionally trying to give Jenny a bunch of options for how to show it. And then she kind of comes in like the video editor at the end and cuts it all together into a way that she thinks makes the most sense. So I'm usually coming into it with the idea of I want to give her as many possibilities as we have. Um, and then whenever we get to a point, I think where someone says, you know, this thing isn't working, whether it's something Jenny's written or she's like, this, I don't have, you need to draw this instead. You know, it needs to look more like blah. Or I'm like, yeah, this one that you picked, I thought that was going to work, but now that I see it, it's not. We're usually just so practical in terms of
yes.
this project needs to get done. And it's like, and if you're seeing that there's a problem with it, then I'm guessing our readers are going to see the same problem. So that's probably an indication that we should change something. And so we are generally just very quick to say, you know what, that's a good idea. Let's go ahead with that.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, I mean, kids and grown-ups think that critique or being criticized is a negative experience. I think you need to flip it around and turn it as a positive experience because when we're critiquing each other, critiquing for us is we're just looking at something with very fresh eyes so we can see what's wrong. Hello from fourth graders in Natick, Massachusetts. Hello, Massachusetts. We are wondering why and how did you write the series? How do you get your ideas for your stories? Well, so how did we start to write the series? So that's kind of a funny story. It actually began as a fiction, historical fiction novel. I had started to write it because I've written a lot of historical fiction, like Penny from Heaven and Turtle in Paradise, Full of Beans, Our Only May Amelia. So that's kind of in my bandwidth. And so ironically, the 70s, like Matt said, is historical fiction.
You were working your way forward through the timeline from like the 1850s up to the 1950s, and then
and now the 80s are historical fiction.
No.
Let me tell you, yes, in the 80s, that's even worse. So I started writing it as a historical fiction novel. I only got about 30 or 40 pages in. It just wasn't working because when I was writing it, I really just kept picturing Sunny, and I didn't see it as a very dialogue heavy book. I kept imagining her reactions, and it's hard to describe.
Especially because the first book was really about sort of people not, the whole point of the book was like things were going on and people were not talking about what was happening. Like they needed to be talking about it, and they weren't. So it's really hard to just over and over write and no one said anything, you know? And she looked shocked, but she didn't say anything, So whereas you can easily show that in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, so I nagged Matt. I said, let's do this as the graphic novel. And you know what? He said no at
No, I
first.
said no. I said, I don't have time. There's no way we
Yeah.
could do that.
He
And
was
then,
in he was in Baby Mouse and Squish jail. He
yeah.
had so many Baby Mouse and Squish books too. He didn't have any time to breathe. So
Yeah. But then my wife said, I think you could probably do it. And I'm like, all right, let me take, an hour to figure out what the schedule would look like. And then we worked it out.
yeah, and his poor arm.
Uh-huh.
All right, let's see. Okay, Ruben wants to know, what were your favorite kid books when you were growing up? Or even, why don't we expand on that? Like, Matt, in addition to books, did you have any comic influences or graphic novel influences?
Yeah. So when we were kids, there weren't really graphic novels per se. There'd only been like one or two that had ever been made by the 70s, I want to say. And those are all for adults. So, but the thing I later, looking back now, realize is that the thing I wanted to make as a kid, when I was a kid, is kind of like what we ended up making, which was the thing I read all the time were the Peanuts with Charlie Brown and Snoopy, those collections of comics. And they were, these little fat books that were just full of comics, and they were, probably about 100 or so pages long. And we had dozens of them. I read them over and over and over and over again. And that's what I really wanted to make. I only learned, I don't know, when I was like 11 or 12, that all of those were comic strips from daily newspaper strips. I assumed that he had just made them for those books. I didn't realize that they had all been reprints from newspaper comics. And so I'm like, sure, the newspaper comic thing is interesting, but I really want to make these little books of comics, these fat little books of comics. So that's kind of, that was my earliest influence, was Charles Schulz, probably doing Peanuts. And then we had a lot of Dr. Seuss around the house. Our dad was a doctor, and they would get all of these, like, doctor's office editions of them, where they would just like leave them, like the book companies would send, a bunch of copies to the doctor's office. So we had like 3 copies of Cat in the Hat Comes Back, I think.
Yes.
And I never read the original Cat in the Hat until I was an adult, actually, because we had all these other oddball ones. But the best book that we had from Seuss was the Sleep book.
Loved it.
It was just so great. It's about, people and creatures all over the world falling asleep in different ways. And the illustrations are also weird and intricate. And there's like always like some shot of some little fluffy animal falling asleep in some tiny little nook on a mountainside or something, and so it was so much to look at and so much visual interest for it. So those were kinds of the things that like really grabbed my imagination when I was a kid.
Yeah, I loved Lloyd Alexander. He did the Chronicles of Prydain, so the Black Cauldron. It was made into a terrible Disney movie. Don't watch it. Read the book. All right, now more questions. This is one for Matt. So this is another 4th grade class from Natick, is wondering how you gained the stamina. I often wonder, to work so hard on so many illustrations for so long.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know. I think a lot of it was just like sheer necessity. A lot of what keeps you going is just looking at your workload, which is immense, and just having to just keep going on and on and on and on. I had a lot of writers and artists, when they start going from, they usually start at some other job. They start working on these books in their part-time, after work, that sort of thing. And then they go full-time eventually. When we signed up to do Baby Mouse, which is our first series together, we signed up for 4 books that were each 100 pages long, and they had to be turned in like 13 months or something. And I'm like, I can't do this part-time. And so I had to quit. And so I was just drawing all day long, weeks on end. So it was just like a crash course, I think. And then after that, then we came up with the idea for Squish. And then we were doing 2 Squish books and 2 Baby Mouse books a year.
That was bonkers.
So that was crazy. And so once we did that, anything else seemed possible after that point.
And you're a big scheduler. I don't know if you have it on your wall, but there was a point he made these amazing like Excel spreadsheet schedules. Like sometimes it's good, and they're like basically lists of everything he has to do.
And it's literally like our lives are generally planned 3 years out, kind of, in terms of our workload. So Right now, I'm trying to keep most of it digital now. So I have a Google Calendar that's just like every page I have to draw as a separate item, and then I just destroy them as I delete them as I get them done.
Nice. All right, Joanna wants to know, which of your books do you love the most, Matt? What's your favorite?
Ooh, I like Baby Mouse Burns Rubber.
Ooh.
It's a book about her going into a soapbox derby race, but my favorite part is that at the end we got to squeeze in a whole Star Wars sequence where she like destroys the Death Star. So I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so that was like a dream come true.
Oh. I think for me, it's Sunny Side Up, the first Sunny book, because it takes place in Florida.
Yeah.
And our real Gramps, he
Yep.
has passed away, but he used to live in Florida in Vero Beach. And I just love Florida. I love warm weather. I love like funny Florida grass. It's a little like pokey. I love hearing cicadas. So
Alligators.
I love, yeah, exactly. I love a good alligator. All right, let's see. And we have Ben wants to know, this is more of a technical question for Matt.
Yeah.
So how do you actually add the color to your sketches? How does Lark work?
So the way Lark works here, let me show you. Let me do a little screen share and I can just do some live. So I start, as I said, I'll start with just these sketches, and then I ink them, because in the old days you would actually use real pen and ink, but the computer makes things a lot more flexible because I can copy and paste and resize things and move them around and erase, which is fantastic. But then when you can add, so I'm doing this all digitally, but you can also add the color digitally. So I'll just go pick, like a green, and then let me turn off the tracing, and then let's say
cool. I've never watched him do this in real time.
The magic. And so then I might, you can do it like a coloring book, kind of just literally scribble in, but you can also, if you have a large area to color in, you can also use this thing called the magic wand tool, which lets you select inside an area that's already been inked, and then you can just use a paint bucket and dump in the color like that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and so then that's like really sort of simple color. Lark does a lot more interesting things with textures as well, and you can even add. Let's see, we can add a little bit of shading. So we can add like some gray here, which when it intersects with the colors, make it looks like that there's some normal shading. It's not just black and white gray. So you can do all kinds of color tricks, and really just being a digital colorist is an entire job in and of itself. And our friends who do color, they are constantly busy because it's so much work and it's so complex. It can be, and even just doing simple looking color where it's pretty flat and doesn't have that much texture or shading to it, can still be unbelievably difficult and time consuming.
Yeah, it's crazy. And she is so amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from students at Shahala Library. So, do you have advice for middle school kids interested in becoming writers or illustrators someday?
I would say the biggest thing is just to read. Like, that is the number one thing, is to read tons and tons of books, whether you're going to be a writer or an illustrator. Because the thing is, once you've read enough that you kind of know, especially the genre that you're interested in working in, you don't have to think about that part of it. You don't have to think about like how the story works or what the conventions of cartoons are. You don't have to think about how does the speech bubble work again? What's the deal with cartoon panels? What are the expressions supposed to mean? That stuff inside and out. And so if you can just read and absorb all of that ahead of time, then when you go to make your own story, you can focus on making that story work and not worry about all of the surrounding stuff.
Yeah, and I think I'm a big fan of fan fiction. So,
Yeah.
the way artists traditionally, traditional painters and artists, they learn by copying other artists. They copy great masterpieces. So I find that for kids starting out, instead of like trying to come up with your own idea in a whole new world.
Create an entire universe takes so long. Yeah.
And it can be overwhelming. So, find a book that you already like. So if you like Sunny or Baby Mouse or Harry Potter, write a chapter or draw a couple of cells of maybe what happens next at the end of this book, or how would you have ended it, and take your own crack at it that way. And that'll just kind of keep you in the writing and drawing world.
Yeah, because then you can just worry about how that story's working and not have to invent every single thing from scratch.
Yeah. Okay, the last question is, how has the pandemic affected you? Are you able to work more? Will it be in any of your upcoming books, Joshua?
It has not changed my work life at all. I barely had time to leave the house before. I barely have time to leave it now. The only thing is I haven't been traveling for school visits, so
Yeah.
I've actually just kind of been here, but we've instead been working on the house, so I have no extra free time for that.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't affect me either, really, because except for I didn't travel for school visits. I think the biggest change was I have two kids myself.
Oh yeah.
They're older kids. They were a middle schooler and high schooler at the time, so I had my two kids at home doing remote learning. But
and your husband was there
oh
too.
yeah, gee, my husband. Oh my gosh, we had a full house. I was so used to having the house to myself, and then I'm hearing lots of loud voices on Zoom and Zoom classes. So we're kind of getting back to normal. My kids are back in school. My husband is hopefully going back to work in January. But anyway, well, look, you guys have been such an awesome audience. We really enjoyed chatting with you, and Sunny Makes a Splash and all of our books are available at your local Barnes & Noble or at barnesandnoble.com. So keep reading and have a really sunny year.
Woohoo.
Bye.
Bye.